Hello, and good evening, or good day to you, wherever you may be in the world at the moment. And it would be lovely if those of you who are joining us could type into the chat box and just let me know who you are and where you are. And hopefully you know that you are joining us this evening for a chat about hand fasting. So hello, Rebecca in Jupiter, Florida. Never heard of Jupiter, Florida before. Hello, Jackie. Hello, all of you, wherever you are in the world this evening. So without further ado, I am going to add my lovely guest, Liz, to the stream with us. Hello, Liz.
Hello, River.
So I'm here in the south coast of the UK, of Brighton, and Liz, I think you're about 250 miles west of me.
I think so, yes. I'm outside Glastonbury in Somerset in the West Country. And as you can see, it's completely dark outside, and we're into the dark winter time now. But good to be talking to you across the airwaves, River.
Yeah. So Liz and I have been working on something quite exciting together recently. We met up in the summer at Philip Cargon's house, and we recorded some chats for our forthcoming new course, which is going to launch in the new year. And it's called Tying the Knot. So I'm sure you can guess what it's all about. So Liz and I are here tonight to talk about exactly that, and we'll be very happy to answer any questions that any of you may have during the discussion. So do feel free to type questions in the chat box, and I'll try and pick some of them up as we go along. But I thought I would just jump in by asking you how you got into all this hand fastings lark, Liz. So can you, what's the first hand fasting ceremony that you can remember either being at or conducting?
I've went to several of them throughout the 90s. I've been involved in paganism and druidry for quite a long time, and I can't actually remember what the first one was, but I think it was when we moved here to Glastonbury. I was living in Brighton, coincidentally enough, prior to that, and a member of some of the druidic groups down there. And then I moved for various reasons to Somerset, to Glastonbury. And my partner, who is still my partner, I'm happy to say, ran a witchcraft shop. And if you run a witchcraft shop, then people tend to come in and ask about celebrancy, particularly getting on for, 18, 20 years ago. Because celebrancy wasn't quite such a big thing as it is now. It's not really a massive thing now, actually, oddly enough. I still don't think we have quite enough celebrants in the country. But people would ask us to do hand fastings, occasionally funerals, occasionally baby namings, and we just started doing them because there was demand. And over the years, it's grown and grown. And the last one we did couple of weeks ago was on beautiful Dartmoor at Wispens Wood on a very kind of somber October day. It was actually on Samhain, and that was a very memorable one. But they've all been remarkable, memorable in their own ways. I just can't remember what the first one was.
Yeah, well, I will always remember my first one because it was the sort of entry to celebrancy for me, actually. So yeah, I was also in Brighton, and actually with a women's moon group that I was part of, we were running a kind of open celebration for a Beltane on the side of Ditchling Beacon, which is a big hill. I'm sure you know it well, Liz, looking out across the Sussex Weald in one direction,
yes.
and down to the sea in the other direction. But we were on that sort of the side looking out to the Weald, and after our Beltane ceremony, a couple approached me afterwards and said, "We really like the way you held that ceremony. Would you do a hand fasting for us?" And I'd never even heard of hand fastings, but that was in 1999. So yeah, kind of made it up as we went along, really. But yeah,
Okay.
so if you got any idea how many you have done over the last 20 odd years?
I no, I can't remember. My partner's just said it's well over 100.
Yeah,
And yes, it probably is. Yeah, I should think.
yeah,
But no, I don't keep count. Maybe I should actually. I should, but
yeah.
it's several a year, and as I say, they're all very different. That's the great thing about hand
Mm.
fasting, diversity.
So yeah, tell me some of the different places that you've conducted hand fastings in.
Well, yeah. Well, the last one was Wistman's Wood, which was fantastic. We had to walk about a mile to get to the wood. As you know, it's quite a way off the road, and that was lovely. And then a few years ago, sorry if you can hear a cough in the background, that's the dog. I do apologise.
Okay.
And yes, we can edit her out perhaps. And some years ago, we were asked to do a hand fasting down in Charleston in Cornwall, and that was a wonderful one because that was on a pirate ship. And the people who were getting hand fasted, who are now good friends of ours, were a pirate crew, so they all dressed up. And that's the only hand fasting where the groom has actually let off a cannon to mark the start of the ceremony. Fortunately, nobody died. I don't think there was a cannonball in the cannon. And that was a fabulous one. And then another one that we did was actually on Clevedon Pier. I don't know if you know Clevedon at all in the West Country. It's a lovely little town, and it's right on the edge of the Severn Estuary. And there's a little old Victorian pier extending out into the Bristol Channel. And we hand fasted a lovely couple who wanted to be hand fasted on the pier itself. So we hired the pier and we went out and hand fasted them just as the sun was going down. And that's also the only hand fasting I've ever been to in which somebody caught a flounder halfway through, because there was an old gentleman fishing off the pier and he suddenly landed an enormous fish, which you don't expect at a wedding, really. But that
No.
was highly entertaining. But I
That,
bet you've had some memorable ones as well.
I certainly have. As I was listening to you, some were flashing into my mind. That first one was in a lovely kind of community garden in Stanmer Park, which again you may know, where there's a lot of lovely kind of organic, small holdings and projects there. One of my most memorable was a full moon on the winter solstice on Brighton Beach. Quite a windy evening, but yeah, we had a fire and a fire bowl on the beach, and that was very beautiful. I've done a couple of hand fastings when we had the Brighton wheel, which was one of those kind of giant wheels, not quite as big as the London Eye, but like a giant Ferris wheel or big wheel sort of next to the sea, that was there for a few years. And I actually did two on there that were both small, obviously quite private ceremonies, because we were just in one of those little pods. They were both for vow renewals, and yeah, like yourself, many in woodlands and people's back gardens, and yeah, nearly all of them outdoors. Does tend to be a ceremony that people want to do outdoors. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes, we've done quite a few in gardens, and of course, because we're in Glastonbury, the tour. That's a perennially popular choice for brides. So for pagan couples generally. So either they're on the apron of land.
Oh, oops. Oh, sorry. We've temporarily lost Liz's signal. Oh, we lost you for a moment there, Liz.
Okay, then yes, you're a little bit crackly on this end, I must say, but yes,
Okay.
I think the gremlins are in the equipment again.
So Poppy Kutenk. I'm not sure how to pronounce your surname. Sorry, Poppy. I'm not going to try. But Poppy's saying, can you give an overview of a hand fasting? Poppy's never been to one.
Okay.
To you, Liz.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we start with a sort of a set ritual format, but we do discuss it quite extensively with the hand fasting couple, and really it's driven by them. So it's what they want, which makes them all very different. But if we take an average hand fasting, we would start with a ritual structure. This is a classic pagan ritual structure in which we draw a circle, a sacred circle, which incorporates everybody in the hand fasting. with the couple and ourselves in the middle. We'd then consecrate it with water. So you would go round, explain the role that water has. It's the element of the emotions of love, of healing, of union. And you consecrate your circle with water. Then you consecrate your circle with fire, for passion and commitment and energy and communication. And then what we would do is call the quarters, which you might be familiar with. We'd start in the east with the rising of the sun, the dawning of the day, move down to call the south, the noonday, the summer, the heat of the sun, and then move around to the evening, to autumn in the west, and then to midnight in the north. And we'd call the northern quarter. Having done that, we've set up our ritual circle, and then we'd ask our hand fasting couple whatever they want to do in the middle of that circle. That's going to be probably to say their vows. Some people exchange rings, not all. A lot of people, that's why it's a hand fasting, it's tying the knot. A lot of people join their hands with a cord. And then other things, people ask their relatives to recite poems or sing. Sometimes people want to say a few words about the hand fasting and about the couple themselves and just give their good wishes. So that kind of format in the middle can be as long or as short as the hand fasting couple actually choose. Once we've finished that, we rewind everything. We thank the quarters. We start in the north, go back to the west, to the south, to the east. And then we don't unconsecrate, but we do wind the circle back. So we undraw the circle. And then we ask our hand fasting couple to leap over the broomstick in the east, which is the sign of a spring into their new life. It's like leaping over the threshold. So that's it, basically. I hope that's clarifying.
Yeah. So, and I'll just sort of chip in, from my end. I guess I'd probably do an even sort of greater variety of sort of different types of approaches to hand fasting, in that I'm not necessarily putting myself out there as a particularly pagan or druid celebrant. I'm a common or garden celebrant, obviously with a that nature connected sort of spiritual angle, if people want that, but not everybody does want all of that. So I wouldn't necessarily be calling the quarters and consecrating the circle as you do, Liz, but very often, it is something that people are interested when they want a hand fasting. It's because they're drawn to the idea of this ceremony that seems to carry with it the idea of connection to ancient roots and to connecting with the greater world around us. So that's something that we go into in the course, is some of the different approaches to inviting, welcoming the qualities of the elements and directions into the circle. Often, sometimes I get asked to do hand fasting as well, as people might not think of it necessarily as we're having a hand fasting ceremony. They might come to me and say, we want a wedding. And then, what about that thing where you tie the hands together and have it as a rite within the wedding? So, then I'll obviously talk with them about, what it means to them and how to tailor it to their needs. And I see Tabitha's chipping in about interesting, broom leaping is an African American ritual from the American slaveholding area, and slaves weren't allowed to marry, so they would jump the broom in their private secret ceremonies. And that tends to be the thing that most people know about in terms of broom leaping. But of course, it's found in many other traditions as well, including some in the British Isles here, Romany, Wales, and still in Northumbria.
I can't hear you, River. I'm sorry.
Hopefully others online can hear me still. It kind of looks as though I'm on the live stream, so fingers crossed. I am going to say, carry on with what I was about to say, which was in Northumbria or Northumberland, there's still a saying where they talk about living over the broom, because this idea of the the jumping the broom being a kind of unofficial wedding, much as it was for those slave communities. It's a way of enacting a marriage, you know, a folk wedding, if you like.
Yes.
Pagan Jester is asking, have we ever done the pole dance tradition? Don't remember the name, but each family member takes a ribbon that's tied to the top of the pole and dance around it. Oh no, that would be more of a Beltane May
That's more of a
Day
Beltane thing. Yes. Yeah.
celebration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we did it in school when I was a kid. Actually, there's some places still had a maypole, and we did that every May Day. I don't know if you can remember doing that, River. That would have been
I never did it as a child actually,
no,
but I have
no.
been part of some lovely maypole dances, you know, in more recent decades, including
Good.
some lovely ones at Obod camps.
Yeah.
So yes, basically, Liz has written a whole book about this subject. Have you got a copy handy to kind of wave at the camera,
I
Liz?
haven't, I'm afraid. No, I'm so sorry. It's published by Llewellyn in the States, and it's called Modern Handfasting. You can find it. It's sounding like a commercial break. I'm so sorry. You can find it on Amazon. But yes, Llewellyn do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but it does sort of cover obviously lots of things that we're talking about, but I guess what made me prompted me to sort of mention that is obviously in the course of writing your book, you really delved around into the
Yes.
history of this, didn't you, Liz? And
Yes.
you know, as you're picking up from us talking together, there isn't one single bona fide way of conducting a hand fasting, is there?
No, there really isn't, and there never has been. There never has been. It wasn't standardized until really quite late in the day. And then it was sort of taken out of the hands of people who were doing hand fastings, which could have been anybody. Shakespeare did a hand fasting when he was lodging in Silver Street. His landlady asked him if he would hand fast her daughter to her French boyfriend, and Shakespeare duly did. We don't know exactly what he said. There wasn't a set form of words, but you know, in the years to come, it became more standardized, and it stopped being a hand fasting and started being a wedding ceremony. And that was a legally binding ceremony. But if you look back, you know, into the origins of it, then it could take many different forms, and there's no set text, which I think is a great thing about it. And it leaves people very free to write their own ceremony, you know, and put their own input into their ceremony.
Yeah, which is of course what makes it the most special for anybody that takes part, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of people just like that that freedom, really.
Yeah. Let's talk about the actual sort of tying of the knot. There's various different ways that people could hold their hands. Do you do one hand, two hands, four hands?
Oh, it depends really. Yes, we generally do two hands, and quite often it's the you know, left hand to right hand, so that they can stand side by side. So they both put their hands up, and we don't tend to tie it really tightly. I have to say, we tend to drape it loosely round so that they can't extricate themselves. Because if you're trying to jump a broomstick and your hands are tied together, it's you know, it's a little bit of a problem there sometimes. But there's lots of different ways of doing it. As far as I'm concerned, they're all okay.
And what are some of the different things that you've used to drape over or tie the couple's hands together, Liz?
Well, a lot of them make their own hand fasting cords, which is great. A lot of the brides we have, they're quite into the various crafts, and they want to make their own hand fasting ribbons and their own hand fasting cords. And we've had some lovely ones. That some of them are very elaborate. Recently, one of actually not so recently, a few years ago, one of our brides married a guy who was from one of the Caribbean islands, and he was really keen, because he wasn't a pagan, but he was really keen that his heritage should be represented in the hand fasting ceremony. And so they used the colours of his national flag, which I think were green, yellow, and purple, to make the hand fasting ribbon. And I thought that was very nice, because that was, you know, the representation of his cultural heritage as well as her pagan one. And that was a great ceremony. But some of them are great, and some of them are very simple, some of them are very complex. So it can be anything, really.
Yeah, and the last one that I did was actually one of the most beautiful hand fasting cords. the the bride's sister-in-law had crocheted a really beautiful sort of long strip, and then her mother had also done macrame
Oh,
in a
lovely.
sort of toning colour, and they'd sort of
Right.
woven in crystals, and
Oh, fabulous.
I think there were some beads from a grandmother's necklace in there, or
Right.
that reminded them of the grandmother anyway, and then there were a ribbon that was given to them by their little niece and nephew that was special colours for them, and then they had actually had a kind of Gretna Green legal wedding just
Right.
before lockdown. So kind of
Okay.
to connect with that, they'd got a tartan ribbon and
Oh,
sort of woven all
fabulous.
these things together, and
Right.
they'd met there, so they'd made it a bit of a an occasion, the bride and groom, to sort of hold each end, and weave all the
Okay.
bits together. That was a sort of special moment for them in the lead up to the ceremony. And then actually, they were having their ceremony in a really, really special place that was very important to them. And it was on a place where you could camp, or where the groom used to camp when he was younger, and I spent the night there, and they left this sort of hand fasting cord with me, and I gathered a few little things, from the trees, some little cherry stones and acorns and hazelnuts and things, and crocheted little tiny things so
Oh,
that I could attach them to the cord too, which was sort of went with my tree blessing that I finished their ceremony for. So
that's really lovely.
yeah. Tracy Rupp is asking, is the hand fasting for a specific period, like a year and a day, and then renewable? This is something we often hear about and get asked, isn't it, Liz?
Yes, it is. There's nothing in the history, I went into this in some depth, to say that it has to be a year or a day. But it's been taken on by modern paganism, and I think it's totally up to the hand fasting couple. They don't need to specify, but some people like the year and a day because it kind of makes them think about their relationship and their commitment. And if after the year and the day they want to renew, fantastic, it's an excuse for another party, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's a nice thing to do. It's it shows a little bit of thought about relationships and how long they might last and how long you want them to last.
Yeah. And of course, in both in the course and in your book, we sort of talk a little bit more about the origins, in
Yes,
terms of whether it, has been, where that idea might come from, and its history as potentially a betrothal ceremony as well as a kind of wedding ceremony. But we do certainly know that it has long been a wedding ceremony. And as far as I'm concerned, the biggest evidence of that is just the way that we talk about tying the knot and getting
yeah,
hitched.
absolutely. Yes, tying the knot. As
Yeah.
you said, jumping the broomstick, if
Yeah.
it's a colloquial term for a wedding,
Yeah.
tying the knot is a colloquial term.
Yeah.
That's probably Saxon rather than anything else. There seem to be some Roman origins to it, but perhaps it is really kind of lost in the mists of time because these are ceremonies that you undertook in the early days because the priest wasn't available. Maybe you were too far in the countryside, or it was impossible for some other reason. A lot of this country was kind of impassable. Especially in the north, you've got very thick undergrowth in the forests. You don't have very good roads. It's actually, really easy for communities to become rather isolated. So do it yourself is definitely the way to go in those kinds of circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, if we go way back, all ceremonies, of course, would just be, within their communities,
Yeah,
wouldn't they? And
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
so the answer, Tracy, is it can be for a year and a day if people want it to be, or it can be a permanent commitment, or it can be a renewal of vows. It can be a relationship celebration. I've had people that want to have a family hand fasting with their children
Yes.
involved as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, or any of the above, really. Pagan Jester is asking, I think it's in India, the couple walk around a sacred fire holding a wedding band between them. Yes, it is part of a that walking around the fire, it's something called the Pheras,
Right.
P-H-E-R-A-S, that happens within a Hindu wedding ceremony.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So yeah. Can anyone perform a hand fasting? Debbie Warville's asking.
Yeah, actually they can. Now, you've got to be a bit careful because in some countries, hand fastings are legally binding. And in some places, you do need to be a registered celebrant with the authorities if you want to perform a legally binding hand fasting. But you can just do it for your friends. You don't have to be a registered celebrant. And in England, I ought to stress, in England and Wales, it's not legally binding. So no hand fasting that I perform would ever be regarded as a legal ceremony in the sense that, that's in the sense that a marriage is. Whereas in Scotland and Ireland, it's different. The law is changing all the time, and there is a big lobbying group here in England to try and get the law to change. But if you just wanted to do one for your friends, and the only thing I would say is do research it, do make sure you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because they're not tricky ceremonies, but you do really need a bit of practice and rehearsal, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it's very important to distinguish between the legal and non-legal ceremonies. And of course, hand fasting isn't the only way that people choose to kind of maybe separate the legal business from the celebration of their wedding.
Absolutely.
I mean, as I always say to people, if you think about funerals and celebrating babies, the baptism or whatever, the ceremonies have never had anything to do with the legal registration. You legally register this thing and then you celebrate it wherever you like, however you like, and more and more people are sort of cottoning on to the idea that they can do that with weddings. Certainly here in England and Wales, as you say, it's slightly different in Scotland and Northern Ireland, where the pagan members of the Pagan Federation actually can be ratified by that organisation to conduct legally binding pagan hand fasting ceremonies. So that's the legal side. And in terms of can anyone perform one, well, I guess I have just said the very first one I had no experience, but I did go through a lengthy period of planning and preparation with that couple, and sort of really went into what it meant to them, and carefully sort of structured the ceremony together. Marina's asking, we're trying to find a way to merge the Hispanic lasso ceremony and a hand fasting ceremony. I have never heard of the Hispanic lasso ceremony, but I've certainly been part of other ceremonies. I've conducted other ceremonies where we merged ritual from different traditions. Sorry, we've lost Liz for a moment. Hopefully she'll be back any second. And I will re-add her to the stream. We lost you for a moment, Liz.
I was sorry, the whole thing just went down for a moment.
Yeah, the vagaries of the internet. But yes. I was just answering Marina's question, just saying I don't really know about the Hispanic lasso ceremony, but certainly I've done a ceremony. I don't know if Philip Cargom has too, where there was one person from a sort of British tradition and another person from a Hindu tradition in the couple, and creating a ceremony that combines elements of both traditions. I guess it just needs to be done thoughtfully and carefully, and thinking about the sort of logistics of which way round it's best to have things, and the symbolism of those different ritual elements, and which order that they work in, and also really importantly making sure that everybody who's there really understands why those two things are happening and what they mean in that context.
Absolutely.
Mary Lowe's just chipping in. I'm not sure. Sorry, Mary, I missed where you're from, but I'm guessing a notary public. Yeah, there are some countries where a legal officiator can add a hand fasting ceremony as well. Here in the UK, I don't. It can't be a part of the registrar's ceremony because it's that has certain restrictions around it. But there is a version that sometimes happens in church ceremonies, isn't there? When the priest kind of lays their, what do they call it, their stole, or they lay that long piece of fabric over the couple's hands, which they might not necessarily tie it, but it's it's something that, where I guess an older tradition has sort of crept into the Christian tradition.
Yes, they did that when the Kate Middleton and Prince William's hand fasting marriage. They draped that over the hands. When I saw that, I thought, oh yeah, I know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy Herx is asking, what makes it pagan?
What makes it pagan is essentially deity, I think. A lot of our hand fasting couples aren't religious, but some of them are. And in that case, they would ask for specific gods or goddesses to, be called in, or will at least watch over the ceremony. I don't think anybody's going to do a full kind of invocation necessarily, but certainly that, specific spirits would watch over the ceremony. We tend if we're doing ceremonies on the tour, we definitely play a nod to Gwyn ap Neath, who is the king of the fairies who lives underneath the tour. And I would definitely say, the spirits of the land, spirits of the place that you're in, need to be honored. That's not necessarily a pagan thing. That can be a humanist thing as well. But yes, if you're dealing with specific pagan deities, then that makes it pagan.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess if it's for a pagan couple and you're reflecting their beliefs and their outlook, because of course there's not one single path of paganism either, is there? It's quite a sort of diffuse and various too. But one thing that I did really want to sort of delve into in the course, which we do, it's just a 3-lesson course, but on the second lesson, I really delve into what makes a ceremony magical, which I think is a sort of broader way of looking at that question, really. I hope that what we throw into that lesson kind of really casts some light on that, in the discussion, and also in the kind of invitation that's there to sort of work with some of the things we've talked about, calling the quarters and So just picking up on some of the other comments there. For a great comment from Fox. It's always important to remember that you're helping to make someone else's memories, and you should use the reverence that comes with that.
Absolutely.
Tracy asking, in countries where it's legally binding, does the couple have to divorce legally if they decide to separate? I presume the answer to that is yes. And Pagan Justice saying you can always go to the government, get the legal papers after that, have the ceremony, which is indeed what a lot of...
We're having, just to let you know, we're having trouble connecting. River, I can't hear you.
Okay. I'm guessing that it might be coming in your end a little bit as well, Liz.
It might well be, yes. I'm really sorry.
These things happen.
I have to say the net connection here is not brilliant.
Yeah.
We have had trouble with Skype before, so
yeah.
I'm so sorry about that.
Not to worry. I think we're getting by. Art's asking, as a suggestion, is it appropriate to spend some time with friends or family to ensure that they know what's afoot? And yeah, I'd like to come in on that one first, if you don't mind, Liz. Which is just to say that because most of the ceremonies that I do, even if the couple may be pagan leaning or nature curious or whatever they might be, by their very nature, if you've got a wedding ceremony, you're going to have lots of different people from different parts of your family and friends, and they're not all necessarily going to share the same views and beliefs and outlook. And I think it's really important, whatever kind of ceremony we're conducting, that we just make sure that anybody, no matter what their own personal path is, can feel really welcome and really included and understand exactly what's going on at every stage. So I wouldn't necessarily spend time beforehand or even tell the couple that they need to explain beforehand, but I would make sure that every stage of the ceremony that I'm conducting, that I explain what's going on, and that people gives people some way of relating to it. And in the course we offer lots of examples of how to do that. Have you got anything to add to that, Liz?
No, I completely agree. I mean, we do tend to explain a little bit as we go along. And, we explain why we're calling the quarters, why we're drawing a circle, what we're doing. And, mostly people are actually very amenable to it. We've had very few problems, I think. And a lot of the people who aren't pagan really like it because they can understand the idea of sacred space. And they understand the idea of the quarters and the 4 directions. Everybody can get behind that.
Yeah.
And I think we've had really good responses from it. But I do agree. I think you have people from all different walks of life and all different traditions. A lot of them, it's paganism's shop window, really. It's the one pagan ritual they're likely to be invited to and to attend. So, it's kind of incumbent upon us as celebrants and as priest and priestess to explain a little bit about it to people who are curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Pagan Jess is saying a wedding destination, best wedding is a destination wedding far away from home on a Wednesday. Then you won't have a lot of guests. The wedding will probably be cheaper. Some people do go for the kind of elopement idea and a private, very intimate, personal ceremony. Have you conducted any of those, Liz? Oh, I think we've lost Liz. Go momentarily. Yeah, you're back. I was just asking you. Some people go for private and personal elopement type ceremonies. Do you do many of those?
I'm really sorry, I can't hear you. Do you think you could type the question into the chat box for me, and then I can answer?
It was. It's actually showing there on the side, in the side panel, my end. I'm just picking up on the idea of have done any private ceremonies?
Hold on. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay, I have found it now. Sorry.
Yeah.
Trouble connecting.
So I'm just thinking in response to Pagan Jester's comment. Yes.
The question about divorce. Yes, if you were legally married, you'd have to, in any kind of ceremony, you would have to legally divorce. Yes.
Okay. Now I was just talking about the idea of a small intimate hand fasting, Liz, as opposed to a bigger, more inclusive ceremony. And I just want to say, in response to that, Pagan Jester's comment there, it can be really a big part of the magic of a wedding, though. Also, the idea that you celebrate this most intimate and personal of commitments and relationships, with all the people who are special to you, all the people that matter in your life. Lynn's asking, are there any resources on how to conduct a hand fasting? And my answer to that, Lynn, is there are a couple of really excellent ones. Not that this is necessarily just an advertising chat. We want to chat about this subject because we're both very passionate about it and interested in it. But Liz's book is a great place to start. And also we're about to launch our new School of Celebrancy Tying the Knot course in the new year. So you may be interested in that when it comes online. Debbie's just saying, I've attended several handfastings where friends and family have no knowledge of the couple's pagan beliefs, and they thoroughly enjoyed the whole process. And I have to say, but
Yeah.
actually, it often is the person that comes up to you at the end after the ceremony and makes a point of saying, I'd never been to one before, and I found that really special and amazing, often is the person who says, and I'm a committed Christian, or
Yes.
it's often that person who actually is pleasantly surprised by how that really responds to how special that ceremony feels.
Yes, it's often the older people as well,
Yeah.
who really enjoy it. That's quite interesting too.
Yeah. I think the people who come up afterwards are often the people that were sort of didn't know what to expect, and
Yes,
probably might have been slightly nervous about it, and might have expected something that they wouldn't enjoy or be able to relate to, and then are quite blown
absolutely.
away to
Yes.
find that it is not like that at all.
Yes,
Um,
it's, sometimes I think people do get quite nervous about it, and that's
mm,
understandable. If you're going into a situation and you really don't know what to expect, then
mm,
it can be, intimidating, and we don't really want that to happen.
yeah. Well, we're about 40 minutes in, which is a kind of good length of time for a chat on a Tuesday evening, I think. So I'm just going to ask you, Liz, is there anything else that really important that you would like to say about handfastings before we draw our discussion to a close?
I don't think so. I think the only thing I would stress that it's very much driven by the couple.
Yeah,
It's what they want, not what we might impose upon them. There's no set text, and there's
yeah,
no right way to do it really. So,
yeah,
absolutely, I would encourage people to
yeah,
explore, and it's a chance for people to, kind of connect with their own ritual creativity.
yeah. Uh, yeah, I think that's a lovely way of putting it. A chance to connect with their ritual creativity, and we might say there are lots of right ways of doing it as well. And I would like to bring our broadcast to an end, as I usually do, by just inviting us to share a little moment together. And I have a blessing to read that's often used at hand fasting ceremonies that some of you may have heard before. And this is called Blessing of the Hands, and it's actually by a reverend, but you'll hear why this is such a beautiful blessing for hand fasting ceremonies. These are the hands of your best friend, young and strong, full of love for you. Hands that are holding yours on your wedding day as you promise to love each other today, tomorrow, and forever. These are the hands that will work alongside yours as you build your future together. These are the hands that will passionately love you and cherish you through the years, and with the slightest touch will comfort you like no other. These are the hands that will hold you when fear, sadness, or grief fills your mind. These are the hands that will countless times wipe the tears from your eyes, both tears of sorrow and tears of joy. These are the hands that will tenderly hold your children. These are the hands that will hold your family together as one. These are the hands that will give you strength when you need it. And lastly, these are the hands that, even when wrinkled and aged, will still be reaching for yours, still giving you the same unspoken tenderness with just a touch. Do you know, something came to me as I was reading those words, and what I just thought was, if I think most of us, if we sort of think back to our first ever kind of romantic inklings, or even the beginnings of whatever relationships we're in now, like, often holding hands is one of the very first things that happens, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes,
One of the first ways that
yes,
people actually kind of express that sort of
Yes.
specialness. So yeah, makes even more sense that that's the way that we first started celebrating commitment and love in many parts of the world. Well, thank you again, Liz,
A pleasure. Thank you so much.
for joining me, and thank you all of you wherever you may be for joining us this evening. Thanks to everyone who's spiced up our discussion with your lovely questions and comments. We wish you all the very best of the season, and yeah, this will probably be the last broadcast for this year, but we'll be back with a new broadcast in January. I will post about it on the Facebook pages as ever. Take care, everyone. Thanks again, Liz.
Thank you so much.